the mural paintings on the conquest of Mallorca. These paintings are one of the best known by Catalans and Mallorcans as they have been broadly published in historical books to illustrate how the conquering of Mallorca developed. To be exact, the event of the arrival of the Armada and assault to the city of Mallorca in 1229 by the Catalan troops against what it was then a Muslim kingdom. One century earlier, leading the Count Ramon Berenguer III, and with the help of the Republic of Pisa, an important maritime power, before it was taken over or became undiminished by the Republic of Genoa, later by Venice. So the main maritime power by this 12th century was Pisa. Therefore, they built such a precious tower and cathedral on the baptistry. So it was before this conquering that now we are narrating, we are the peak, and it is the peak in these murals from 1260 around, and the conquering from 1229. One century before, it was tried from Barcelona, that nowadays with a speedboat is like a couple of hours, and with a normal ferry it's like 8 hours. So by 1110, it was already tried, but it wasn't successful. Then, together, the relatively little county of Barcelona that had not yet conquered the more southern part and later incorporate into the Confederation, the Catalan Aragonese, Valencian, indeed Mallorca. Before it was relatively smaller, but Pisa was quite an important maritime power, as we were commenting, and then try to conquer that land of this big island and two other smaller, altogether the Balearic Islands, so Minorca and Ibiza, also because they were generating troubles because there were pirates from them, from there, from Mallorca. And sometimes they arrived to the Christian coast, so a part of the grid of conquering this big island also to stop this trouble with the pirates from Mallorca that didn't let them trade more freely or more peacefully. But what then in 12th century didn't succeed, 100 years later, with Jaume I, James the First, the Conqueror, on the throne now with double title of Count of Barcelona and King of Mallorca, sorry, of Aragon, the country was far more consolidated. It was richer, had a stronger merchant navy, and overall, it had more population. These factors were key in the success of the military campaign and the later preservation of the newly incorporated land into the Catalan Aragonese crown. The expedition was decided in the house of the rich merchant Pere Martell, in his palace in Tarragona, and the armada took sail from the neighboring village of Salou, nowadays a popular touristic resort with clean, natural lime orange beaches and small cales, small beaches, half rocky, sandy beaches. The military action, beyond the financial support of the bourgeoisie from the towns like Barcelona, Perpinyà, in the north of Catalonia, since 1640, after the Treaty of Pyrenees and the War of Succession, the War of Secession, was taken by the French and still is within French administration. Also towns like Girona, Lleida, so also had the backing of many noble families. This enterprise that was the conquering. The military enterprise was the sole business of Catalonia, because the other confederated country, Aragon, refused to participate, as they reckoned Mallorca too far away to be interested in it. Remember that Aragon is an inland country, while Catalonia has like 400 kilometers of coast. And that is the reason why Mallorca is part of the Catalan lands. So the native language there is Catalan, because it was fully repopulated from people coming from Catalonia. On the contrary, some 10 years later, in the conquering of Valencia, the Aragonese, this time, they did participate. And then the aftermath was that part of a new population that went there to this new conquered land that also was a Muslim kingdom, the Kingdom of Valencia. So these newcomers that they went to this new world almost, they were not only Catalan but also Aragonese. And therefore, some areas there nowadays, still in Valencia, are not Catalan speaking but Castilian. The repopulation of Mallorca and Valencia also differs from the treatment that the local population of Muslim religion received. In the first case, some historians believe that they were quite massacred in great numbers, and the ones that they were able to survive, to escape, then they went to the mountains. That in Mallorca, so nowadays a very famous touristic resort, but also the inland is quite mountainous, and even sometimes it's snow up there in the mountains, Serra da Tramuntana. But on the contrary, with the conquering of Valencia, once learned the lesson that it's not good to provoke killings or evictions, because later you don't have workforce to work the lands or to produce taxes with the trade. And so with this second conquering, after Mallorca came Valencia, the conquerors, they mainly respected the local Muslim population. The paintings were found in the Palace Aguilar in the Montcada Street and in the Saloon of Tinei, both in Barcelona. In the first case, it was a consequence of restoration works to get ready the old palace of a merchant's family for the new use. That it was the Picasso Museum, which actually began with this only single palace, but in the next 40 years had been adding the, the neighboring palace, and nowadays it's a row of 5 palaces all interlinked within the courtyards. Once found, these paintings, they were stripped off with the strapo technique that we have explained in the previous chapter. They were stripped off from the original place and brought to the MNAC, Museu Nacional d'Art de Catalunya. The mural paintings of the Tinei Saloon were left in the place where they were found after clean restoration. Unlike the other ones, they also had been hidden there for so many centuries. So the ones from the Picasso Museum, they were covered, and the people didn't know it was these paintings. And also in the second case of this palace that used to be the Palace of the Kings, the throne saloon also, they were hidden behind new altars. So the people lost the memory of his existence. That is because after the War of Succession, when Catalonia lost its independence, the old Saloon of Tinei, which was part of the Royal Assembly rooms, was given to the order of the Clarisses nuns from Santa Clara, the order of Saint Clare or Clara. And in this Baroque period, the nuns fully reformed the old king's palace, adding many new walls, tribunes, chapels, leaving behind the old medieval walls that they didn't like it anymore. Then, by 1936, with the Spanish Civil War, the nuns left their convent, that before had been the Palace of the King, and the building went to the hands of the Council of Barcelona. The new owners, wishing to restore the old palace to its original shape, they start to dismantle the fake walls and structures added by the nuns. Thus, it was revealed the great mural paintings forgotten for so long. The two paintings we are showing are archetypical of the so-called lineal Gothic style. That was the way to paint along the 13th century. To some degree, that style is an evolved Romanesque. I would say evolved because the figures get more dynamism than the previous pure Romanesque. The people represent acquire more movement and are shown in a more open and lively background. Not like before in the Romanesque, that the figure seems flying in an empty color background or just packed in a melee of heads and bodies. But like the Romanesque, in that lineal Gothic, like in the previous Romanesque, the main stylistic protagonist is the line. That resource is the one which defines the contours of the figures, which follows a pre-established template with the same body building, height, and so on. So there is not much individualization of the represent figures. So as said, bodies and heights of the people represented are pretty the same, while it is with the clouds, the coat of arms, crowns, halos on the saints or behind the heads of the saints, and other apparel that the painter differentiated the people. That painting style came from France, and it was the mainstream in painting until it was displaced by the Tuscan Trecento. That new style was a landmark in the growing humanism of the times that ended up with the Quattrocento Renaissance. Painters like Giotto in San Francis d'Assisi and followers like Ferrer Bassa in Catalonia started to represent the figures more human-like, with volumes and with a spatial sense closer to reality. The paintings kept in the Manac are more complex than the ones from Diné, but the later, depicting many knights aligned with their lances, armors, and banners, together with soldiers, beyond their artistical value, they are also precious as they are a document of the noble families of the time, that as feudal lords they invested in the enterprise of the conquering of Mallorca and got the due award, becoming also lords of lands in the big island of Mallorca. So, for example, the Bishop of Barcelona, that was one of the great lords of the Principality, so was investing in this military enterprise, and so according to his investment, and even sending some of his own troops, probably, because normally the bishops in these times sometimes they even participate personally as kind of knights. So then he got his reward, and he ended up being like the lord, collecting the due taxes of his new land of a quarter of Mallorca. Mallorca is quite a big island. The coat of arms built by the different knights were actually very helpful to the historians in order to trace back who was who in the conquering of Mallorca, which occurred in 1229. The paintings discovered in the Aguilar Palace show the preparatory camp before the assault into the city. The king stands in martial council with the highest knights is a perfect representation of the feudal order of the time. The lords, vassals of the Count King, listen attentively the indications of his master, the sovereign. The tarpaulin of the tent of Jaume I, called the Conqueror because the conquering of Mallorca and Valencia, show the vertical yellow and red bars. That is also a proof that by that time, what later became the Catalan flag was already identified as the emblem of the Catalan dynasty called the Lònida, which was extinguished with Martin the Humane in 1410, giving place to the Castilian Trastamara dynasty. The left part of the painting shows the city of Mallorca, with his turret walls and his desperate defenders, represented with dark skin as a way to signify that they were Saracens. On the contrary, the Christian troops are represented with much more whiter faces. Both scenes are skillfully separated by a tree in between, together with a hill and what it seems the beach of Palma de Mallorca. The mural paintings were not done exactly at the time when the military events took place. They were done some 60 years later, and they follow what the king himself left written in the first of the four great chronicles, El Llibre dels Fets, the book of the events, the book of the facts, which is one of the best pieces of medieval literature and a monumental piece of historical narration, a kind of memoirs of the king. So it is an autobiographical text, explaining the things, life and miracles that happen, always enhancing the figure of the king, as he himself probably kept dictating it to his writers. So whether or not he was too kind or critical to himself, the chronicle has the value of the vividness of the events narrated, as the king writer was the main character of them and the decision maker of them. The second great chronicle, written by Bernat Desclot, covers the time of the son of Jaume I, which was Pere el Gran the Great. Probably he got this adjective because he was the conquering of Sicily. In this second chronicle, there are also some chapters dedicated to the conquest of Mallorca, the son remembering his great father. Very kind words are dedicated to the conqueror. Was the Count of Barcelona the best knight of all, from the best lineage in the whole world? This king, James of Aragon, is a palm higher than the rest, and he is very well built and handsome, with a red and cheerful face, his nose and mouth so well proportioned, and his blond hair seems made of golden threads. And he has a very good heart, and merciful he is, and he's always willing to fight against the Saracens, so he is a very good Christian also. Bernat Claude, the writer of that second chronicle, also remembers us how difficult was the childhood of that promising king, as he became orphan when the father, Peter the Catholic, died in the Battle of Muret, which is in South France, and otherwise it is related to the wars against the Cathars and how the Catalan expansion to the north was stopped by the expansionists of the French to the south. When the infant James was being reared in the Abbey of Mont-Arago, his uncle agreed with a powerful knight to split the land in between them, wishing to disinherit the future king. But when that infant grew up, and he was 20 years old, he let himself be crowned in Saragossa, the capital of Aragon, to become the overlord of all the lands, and went to war against the lords that had opposed him, and thus finally all accepted him. In the passages dedicated to the siege and attack of the city of Palma de Mallorca, the narration is very detailed, and for sure the painter of the mural painting we are commenting was copying these written lines. It was then when the king ordered to build some wooden towers and on them catapults to shot against the defenders. But from inside were throwing all kinds of missiles. So by Tuesday everybody was fighting as he could, some digging trenches beneath the wall, some others putting in fire the gates of the town. Everybody working day and night to take the town. As an immediate consequence of the conquering, much population was lost, whether for the killing of the defenders, they escaped to the hills, the survivors, or also many others taking capture, they were sold as slaves. In this point, let us remember that in these times many conquerings were done for the sake of holy war against the unfaithful, like the Crusaders in the Near East. But the demographic gap that probably is up for Mallorca after this is not known for sure, but the historians they guess it, these massacres of the local population of Muslim religion, it was very quickly filled by newcomers from Catalonia, especially from nowadays Costa Brava. So Calella, Cadaqués, this northern eastern part of Catalonia, despite the radical change from a Muslim civilization into a Christian one, the island, and its capital, very quickly began to grow and to shine along the 13th and 14th century. The new inhabitants continued the great noble tradition of the Mallorca of the Muslims some centuries before, and even increased that maritime expertise, reaching all the Mediterranean and probably even the Atlantic, the Canary Islands, as we know for sure because actually in a Mapa Mundi of the time, made by a Jew from Mallorca, Crescens. It is the flag of Mallorca, Catalonia in the Canary Islands. That they were native people until they were massacred 10 years before the arrival of Columbus in America. So actually the Canary Islands was in this expansionist of Castile, the other big country or nation in nowadays Spain, before jumping into America, they made this step in between that was the Canary Island. And it is said, after some genetic research, that no man survived while the women they survived. Craftsmen, merchants, bankers, all profited and prospered with the opening of new trade routes. And this time of wealth was projected with some jewels of the Gothic architecture, like the cathedral or La Llotja. and the works of great figures like the map maker already commented Kerskens, who made a Catalan atlas nowadays in the Bibliothèque Nationale de Paris, who made the Catalan atlas, as we were commenting, probably the more precise map mundi of the time, and also one of the greatest figures of Mallorca of all times and of the Catalan thinking was from this 13th century Ramon Llull, a humanist about la letra and a promoter of peace and understanding in between the different religions and civilizations.